He didn't mean to conquer an empire. That was the first thing he told the cameras, the generals, and eventually the kneeling alien warriors who were now covering his lawn. It had started the way most interstellar disasters start. Someone underestimated humanity. The Varelian Empire had arrived in orbit with gleaming obsidian warships and a declaration of inevitable subjugation. They had studied Earth's media, intercepted our broadcasts, and concluded we were soft, emotional, divided, easy. They were half right. We were emotional. What they didn't account for was stubbornness. He wasn't even supposed to be the hero. He was a tactical systems analyst assigned to a defense cruiser that was already outgunned. When the first barrage hit, half the command structure vanished in plasma fire. Communication scrambled. Orders contradicted each other. Varelian ships moved in precise, elegant formations like dancers who had rehearsed extinction for centuries. He did the most human thing imaginable. He ignored the elegant part. He rerouted civilian satellites into their targeting grid. He overloaded outdated rail cannons beyond safety margins. He faked retreat patterns that were actually bait. He sent scrambled transmissions that sounded like internal panic but were laced with false coordinates. He made decisions too fast for fear to settle in. When his captain hesitated, he didn't. When the enemy anticipated logic, he chose audacity. The Varelians prized structured dominance. Their warfare doctrine centered around overwhelming presence and psychological submission. They believed once a species witnessed superior force, surrender followed naturally. Humans did not surrender naturally. We improvised. The first Varelian dreadnought fell because he noticed a micro-delay in their shield cycling. The second fell because he exploited their refusal to break formation. The third detonated when he ordered a collision maneuver no algorithm would ever recommend. By the time the dust settled, their invasion fleet was a debris field glittering against Earth's sunrise. He didn't give a victory speech. He asked if anyone else's hands were shaking. The Varelian Empire did not respond with retaliation. They responded with ritual. 3 days after the battle, a vessel descended, not armed for war, but draped in ceremonial banners of deep violet and silver. Global broadcasts went live. Every major network cut to the same image, a ramp lowering, mist spilling out, and towering figures stepping forward in polished armor. They were the Varelian warrior caste. And they were female. 7 feet tall, crested with bioluminescent markings that pulsed softly along their temples and collarbones. They carried no weapons. Instead, each bore a blade reversed in her hands, a sign of offered service in their culture. The world watched as they approached him. He had been dragged to the landing site in a wrinkled jacket, still protesting that this was probably paperwork. The lead warrior stopped 3 paces away. Then she knelt. Not a bow. Not a diplomatic incline. A warrior's kneel. Behind her, dozens followed, armor ringing softly as metal met ground. Through the translator, her voice carried across the planet. You shattered our fleets. You stood when others would fracture. By right of conquest and proof of supremacy, we offer ourselves in devoted service. He blinked. I think you've misunderstood something, he said into a forest of microphones. The translator repeated his words in their tongue. The kneeling warrior's markings brightened. The lead female's voice softened. His humility confirms his dominance. Around the globe, social media imploded. Within hours, he had new titles. Conqueror of the Varelians. The reluctant warlord. Humanity's apex male. None of which he particularly enjoyed. He tried again. I don't want servants. Translator. Glow brightening. Murmurs of reverence. He rejects indulgence. One warrior whispered audibly. Such control. This was spiraling. Earth's diplomatic corps attempted intervention. The Varelians explained calmly that their civilization operated on strength-based hierarchy. When an external force proved overwhelming superiority, members of the warrior caste were honor-bound to pledge themselves in service. It stabilized political transitions. It prevented rebellion. It acknowledged undeniable power. And he had undeniably crushed their forces. The problem was that in Varelian culture, service, did not mean obedience in chains. It meant proximity, protection, dedication, alignment. It meant attaching themselves to the victor's household. Which is how, 48 hours later, an armored transport settled neatly outside his suburban home. He had just poured coffee when the shadow passed over the window. His wife glanced up from the kitchen table where she had been calmly reading updates about galactic diplomacy like it was neighborhood gossip. "Oh," she said pleasantly. "They're early." He choked on his coffee. "They're not supposed to come here." A knock followed. Polite. Controlled. Powerful enough to rattle the frame. He opened the door. The same lead warrior stood there, flanked by a dozen others. Their armor gleamed less aggressively now, ceremonial etchings catching morning light. They knelt again on the walkway, ignoring confused neighbors peeking through curtains. "Great Conqueror," the translator chimed. "To serve you fully, we must serve your household." "I don't have a household," he began automatically. His wife appeared beside him, folding her arms with amused composure. "We do," she corrected gently. The lead warrior's luminous gaze shifted to her. The air seemed to thrum with evaluation. "And you are?" the warrior asked. His wife extended her hand like she was greeting new PDA members. "I'm his wife." The translator processed the word. A pause followed. The warrior's markings flickered uncertainly. "Primary bonded partner?" "That's right." The silence stretched. Then, in perfect unison, every armored Varelian lowered further, knees, fists to ground, heads bowed. "If you are the chosen equal of the Conqueror," the lead warrior intoned, "then you stand above us." His wife tilted her head thoughtfully. "Well," she said, stepping forward onto the porch, "if you're going to serve this household, you should probably start by taking off the armor before you scuff the floor." The warriors froze. They processed. They obeyed. Metal disengaged with hydraulic sighs as 12 towering alien soldiers carefully removed battle plating and stacked it with military precision beside the flower beds. He leaned toward his wife and whispered, "Is this really happening?" She smiled without looking at him. "You won a war," she murmured. "I'll handle the guests." Behind them, the kneeling warriors waited for instruction, luminous markings glowing with something that looked suspiciously like devotion. He stared at the line of armored giants now respectfully barefoot on his lawn. "Oh no," he breathed. By the third day, the neighbors had stopped pretending this was a government exercise. 12 towering alien warrior women moved through the quiet suburban street with terrifying discipline and absolute politeness. They did not speak unless addressed. They did not blink unnecessarily. And they treated the modest 2-story house like it was the command center of a conquering dynasty. Inside, the adjustment period had begun. The first morning, one of them had attempted to stand sentry outside the bathroom while he showered. "That is not necessary," he had insisted through the door. Through the translator came a firm reply. "The Conqueror is most vulnerable during cleansing rituals." His wife had intervened before he could escalate the argument. "In this house," she said calmly from the hallway, "privacy is part of security." The warrior paused. "Privacy is strategic concealment?" "It's trust," she corrected. There was a long silence. Then, "Understood." From that moment on, they treated closed doors like sacred boundaries. The kitchen became a battlefield of confusion. 8-foot warriors did not understand the purpose of a blender. The first time it turned on, 3 of them dropped into defensive formation. One reached for a weapon that was no longer there. "It makes smoothies," he tried to explain. The translator struggled with the word. "Pulverized fruit beverage," his wife clarified. The warriors nodded solemnly, as if this was an advanced chemical weapon they would study later. Vacuuming was worse. They approached it like a tactical sweep. One cleared corners. Another secured the perimeter. When the machine roared to life, they moved with coordinated efficiency that would have terrified an enemy platoon. His wife watched from the couch, sipping tea. "Excellent formation," she commented. Their bioluminescent markings brightened at the praise. They had not questioned her authority once. The confusion truly began with the ring. One afternoon, the lead warrior requested permission to examine it. His wife extended her hand willingly. The alien's long fingers hovered respectfully above the band of gold. "This device marks ownership?" she asked. His wife laughed softly. "No. It marks choice." The warriors exchanged glances. "You are bound exclusively to the conqueror," another said carefully. "Yet you are not constrained." "That's the point," she replied. "We choose each other. Every day." The concept hit them like a gravity shift. In Varelian culture, strength drew allegiance. Alliances were strategic. Multiple bonds were common among powerful figures to consolidate influence. The idea of deliberate exclusivity, of limiting oneself voluntarily, conflicted with centuries of tradition. "Why deny others the opportunity to align?" one warrior asked him directly. He opened his mouth. Closed it. His wife answered instead. "Because love isn't conquest. It's partnership." The translator rendered the words. The room went very quiet. The warriors studied them both with analytical intensity. "Primary mate general," the lead warrior finally said to his wife. "You restrict access to preserve unity." His wife blinked once, then decided not to fight the title. "Something like that." From then on, they referred to her with unmistakable reverence. Armor was prohibited indoors after the second day, when a shoulder plate scraped the hallway paint. "Remove it at the door," she instructed. They obeyed instantly. She assigned rotations for cooking assistance, cleaning, and perimeter observation. They took notes on tablets brought from their ship, cataloging human domestic doctrine. Tea preparation was recorded as a morale-boosting ritual. Folding laundry became a lesson in controlled precision. Watching 7-foot warriors carefully matching socks would have broken the internet if cameras had been allowed inside. He attempted once to assert himself. "Maybe they don't need to organize the pantry by caloric density," he suggested weakly. The warriors froze. They looked to his wife. She considered. "Alphabetical," she decided. They nodded in unison and began rearranging. He leaned against the counter. "This is my house," he muttered. She smirked. "Is it?" At night, the aliens held quiet discussions in the living room about human bonding structures. They analyzed wedding photographs like military blueprints. They asked about anniversaries. They requested clarification on arguments. "You engage in conflict without combat?" one asked. "Yes," his wife said. "It's called communication." "Does the conqueror win these engagements?" She smiled faintly. "Not often." The warriors looked at him with something dangerously close to admiration. "To yield without losing authority," one murmured. "Supreme confidence," he groaned. Earth's government attempted to schedule formal diplomatic sessions. The Varelian High Council had requested a delegation visit to observe how their warrior caste fulfilled its oath. Apparently, rumors were spreading across the empire that their fiercest soldiers were baking. The announcement came via holographic projection in the living room. "We will arrive within your planetary week," the council declared. "We must witness the structure of this service." The warriors stood straighter. "It will be an honor," the lead warrior said. He turned slowly toward his wife. "Tell me you're not going to turn this into a demonstration." She folded a towel with deliberate care. "Oh, I absolutely am." Later that evening, when the house finally quieted and the alien warriors retreated to assigned quarters with disciplined silence, he sat beside her on the back porch. "This is insane," he said softly. "Yes," she agreed. "They think I'm some unstoppable apex conqueror. You kind of are." "I'm not." She leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. "You stood when it mattered. That's enough for them." He exhaled. "What if this gets bigger?" She laced her fingers through his. "Then we handle it. Together." Inside, faint bioluminescent light glowed under door frames as warrior women studied human marriage articles like sacred doctrine. He squeezed her hand. "You're enjoying this way too much," she grinned. An entire empire is about to learn that serving you means answering to me. He stared at the quiet street, the stacked alien armor gleaming under porch lights. In orbit, diplomatic ships began repositioning. And in the living room, 12 elite alien warriors carefully arranged decorative pillows with military precision, preparing to defend the household doctrine of a human marriage they were only just beginning to understand. The arrival of the Varelian High Council was less of an invasion and more of a slow-motion cultural earthquake. 12 massive ships descended from orbit, black and silver hulls glinting under the morning sun, designed to impress, intimidate, and remind humanity of the futility of resistance. The neighborhood dogs had gone silent hours ago, the streetlights flickered nervously, and every human within 5 blocks had stepped out, hoping to glimpse the spectacle. He stood on the porch, coffee in hand, his wife at his side. Behind them, the dozen warrior women who had pledged service to his household stood at disciplined attention, each trying desperately not to look like their enormous helmets were about to scrape the ceiling fan. Their polished armor reflected the suburban siding, making them appear both terrifying and absurdly out of place. The council expected him to stride forward, cape flowing, command authority radiating like a god-king, ready to accept fealty in theatrical fashion. Instead, he shuffled slightly on the doormat and muttered, Welcome?" The lead counselor's gaze swept the yard with imperious precision, assessing the human, the warriors, the layout, the flower beds. They expected a throne, banners, a courtly display of absolute domination. Instead, they saw his wife directing the warriors in a line, instructing one to reposition a folding chair and another to remove excess shoes before entering the house. "Explain this arrangement," the council demanded through the translator. "TN tactics," she replied with a faint smile, gesturing toward the kitchen where 3 warriors were measuring out sugar for tea while another meticulously scrubbed the countertops. "It's how we maintain morale and discipline." The counselors tilted their heads. They had traveled across the galaxy expecting intimidation, submission, and the visible aura of a conqueror's power. Instead, they witnessed alien warriors kneeling politely to a human woman, arranging flowers, monitoring the pantry, and preparing snacks with exacting precision. The husband hid behind his coffee mug, watching the scene unfold. He could feel the heat rising to his face, partly from embarrassment, partly from the absurdity of the situation. These alien warriors, who could level cities with a flick of their hands, were now following domestic directives as if they were military orders. The wife stood firmly, radiating calm authority. "Strength isn't about intimidation," she explained to the bewildered council. "It's about protection, support, and maintaining order. Serving him means ensuring the household functions efficiently. That's strength." The translator processed each word, delivering them carefully to the counselors. The lead counselor's markings shifted color, a sign of profound confusion mixed with growing respect. They had expected dominance to be enforced through fear and force, yet here was a model of absolute authority conveyed through patience, order, and quiet confidence. One counselor leaned forward. "And these warrior women, they obey you?" "Yes," she said. "But only as part of the household. They respect him because he stood firm in battle. They respect me because I guide that strength responsibly." The alien women shifted in agreement, kneeling slightly lower, their glowing markings pulsing rhythmically. They looked at her with devotion, and at him with admiration tinged by amusement. He tried to peek over her shoulder to explain. "Wait, this isn't what..." She shot him a look that said very clearly, "Shut up and sip your coffee." The counselors whispered among themselves, their translators struggling to capture the nuances of human domestic hierarchy. "This is unexpected," one admitted. "We anticipated a warlord's harem. Instead, a functioning household. Partnership balance." Another leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Yet the conqueror remains the center. His authority is undeniable." "Yes," she said smoothly. "He is central. I am his equal. Together, we direct our household. These women follow the structure we've set. That is service. That is loyalty. That is strength." The counselors paused. Their culture had long defined service as subordination and the demonstration of raw power. They were now observing a model that combined martial respect with human domestic principles, a system in which loyalty was earned, structured, and guided by partnership rather than coercion. The warriors had begun presenting charts, tactical notes, and status updates on household chores, meal preparation schedules, and patrol rotations. They even drafted a daily routine, complete with assigned tea breaks and clean-up protocols. The counselors were visibly taken aback. Here, warlike beings had been repurposed into domestic strategists, following a hierarchy designed by a human woman. He took a deep breath and whispered, "I didn't sign up for this kind of diplomacy." She smiled and rested her hand on his shoulder. "Relax. You won the war. Let me handle the negotiations." The council's lead representative finally spoke. "Your methods, they are alien to us. Yet effective. These women are loyal beyond comprehension. Your household commands them without coercion?" "Yes," she said, nodding toward the kneeling warriors. "And they respect me because I guide that loyalty responsibly. The conqueror's strength is preserved, his household functions efficiently, and together we maintain order." One of the counselors paused, looking directly at the husband. "So, you are the central figure?" He gulped, nodded slightly, and tried to shrink further behind his coffee cup. The wife tilted her head toward him. "Yes. But only because he's remarkable. I merely ensure that the strength he demonstrated in battle translates into stability here at home." Another counselor let out a low hum of understanding. "It is admirable. Perhaps we have misinterpreted service for too long." The warriors behind them shifted to kneel closer to her, as if offering their loyalty in perfect harmony. Their glowing markings pulsed brighter, a signal of emotional and psychological alignment. Even the counselors seemed to acknowledge the power of a household functioning as a disciplined unit, rather than a display of raw force. He finally set down his mug and muttered, "I feel like I'm in someone else's legend." She chuckled softly. "You are. Now just enjoy the chaos. Let them learn our ways." The counselors exchanged glances, realization dawning. Humanity's strength wasn't only in battle, it was in partnership, strategy, and the stubbornness to maintain order without dominance. It was subtle. It was unpredictable. And apparently it was contagious. By the end of the day, the council had agreed to observe further. The warrior women proudly demonstrated chore rotations, food preparation rituals, and even ceremonial tea-making, all under the direction of his wife. The husband hid behind the edge of the table, occasionally peeking at the counselors' stunned faces. He whispered, "We're rewriting interstellar warfare with a teapot." She grinned. "Exactly. And you're doing it perfectly, without lifting a finger." Outside, the sun set, casting long shadows of kneeling warriors, glowing markings, and a very relieved human husband who had somehow survived both war and diplomacy under the most unconventional circumstances imaginable. By the time the first alien moon had risen over the suburban skyline, the aftermath of the council visit had begun to ripple across the Varelian Empire. Word traveled fast in a species built for precision and efficiency, and the tale of 12 of their most elite warriors kneeling before a human woman in a modest Earth household had become legend within hours. Across the Empire, female warriors debated in hushed tones whether strength was measured by conquest or by guidance, while local leaders quietly reconsidered their assumptions about loyalty, hierarchy, and partnership. Back on Earth, the household had settled into a rhythm that could only be described as controlled chaos. The alien warriors moved with meticulous coordination, carrying out their duties with military precision, but infused with the human sense of purpose their mistress had instilled. Breakfast rotations were timed to the minute, counters scrubbed with the patience of someone defusing explosives, and the garden tended as if it were a tactical map of enemy positions. Every detail mattered. Every task had significance. And yet, under it all, laughter bubbled through the halls. He often found himself in the hallway, hovering near the edge of the kitchen or leaning awkwardly against door frames, trying not to interfere but inevitably being noticed. When he attempted to offer suggestions, the warriors politely redirected their attention to his wife, whose calm authority had become the nucleus around which the household rotated. His role had shifted from reluctant conqueror to bemused observer. At first, he had panicked, thinking the weight of an interstellar empire rested entirely on his shoulders. Now, he simply sipped coffee and tried to hide behind her competence, marveling at how seamlessly she wielded influence over beings capable of leveling cities with their bare hands. Their bond had strengthened in ways neither had anticipated. While he had won a war and become a symbol of strength across galaxies, it was her guidance that transformed that victory into stability, loyalty, and order. They shared small moments of intimacy amidst the daily whirlwind, a whispered joke over freshly folded laundry, a hand squeezed across the kitchen counter, quiet acknowledgement of the absurdity surrounding them. Each glance reinforced their connection, a reminder that victory meant little without someone to share it with. Meanwhile, some of the alien women remained in Earth orbit or within the household compound, serving as both guardians and diplomats. They brought intelligence reports, analyzed patterns of human behavior, and provided tactical advice, all while taking care to follow household routines. Their dedication was unparalleled, and yet they deferred to the wife in matters both domestic and strategic, a combination that bewildered Earth officials but delighted the couple. The humans of Earth had long celebrated their ingenuity, but this was a level of adaptation even they had not imagined. The empire itself began to transform. Reports arrived from distant colonies describing a shift in Varelian culture, young warriors studying human marriage rituals, community councils adopting household-based governance, and female commanders emphasizing partnership over hierarchy. Tales of Earth's domestic approach spread like wildfire, inspiring debate, experimentation, and a gradual recognition that true power was not always displayed through sheer force. The couple watched these developments with amusement, occasionally receiving holographic messages from distant sectors showing alien women debating the correct way to fold towels or brew tea, with deadly seriousness. At home, the household continued to expand its influence subtly. The wife instituted a weekly tea and tactics meeting, where warriors would discuss planetary news, household improvements, and occasionally training drills for defending against minor space threats. He sat at the periphery, amused and slightly bewildered, occasionally muttering reminders about Earth customs that had nothing to do with interstellar warfare. She would smile and nod, absorbing his input selectively, and the warriors would dutifully transcribe the discussions into detailed logs for later reference. Evenings were filled with laughter and the gentle chaos of coexistence. Warriors who had once been merciless strategists now competed to prepare meals to perfection. Tactical maneuvers were performed to optimize dishwashing efficiency. Coffee was brewed with military precision, and the placement of every pillow became a matter of protocol. And through it all, the couple remained the center. He, the inadvertent conqueror, she, the commanding heart of the household. One night, as the sun dipped behind distant hills and long shadows stretched across the porch, he turned to her and said softly, "I never imagined this. Not the war, not the household, not any of it." She laughed lightly, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "Neither did I. But somehow it works. Strength is meaningless without guidance. Loyalty without purpose is wasted. And you provided the spark." He shook his head, still in disbelief. "I feel like the universe is laughing at me." She leaned against him, the glow of bioluminescent light from the warriors' markings filtering through the windows, bathing them in soft color. "Then laugh with it," she said. "We won the war. We've taught an empire about partnership, loyalty, and respect. And we've done it together." Outside, distant alien communications buzzed quietly, alerting the Empire that Earth had become an unexpected model of governance, partnership, and domestic order. Young warriors prepared reports, elders debated strategy, and leaders reconsidered centuries-old doctrines. Across countless worlds, the seeds of change were taking root, inspired by a human couple who had faced conquest, chaos, and devotion with humor, patience, and love. The husband exhaled, watching the 12 massive warriors carefully setting the dining table under the direction of his wife. "We're never going to get a quiet night again," he muttered. she grinned, pulling him gently toward the kitchen. Good. Chaos is where life happens. Besides, she gestured toward the kneeling warriors, glowing softly with anticipation. You never know when dinner might involve tactical simulations. He groaned, but smiled. And somewhere in the distance, a new fleet of curious aliens transmitted word that they had heard about Earth's household doctrine. He hid his face behind a mug again, while she chuckled, tugging him back toward the table. The warriors, obedient yet playful, moved with coordinated grace. Humanity had stood firm. Chaos had been survived. And love, partnership, and laughter had become the most formidable force in the galaxy. The sun set, painting the suburban skyline in gold and crimson, illuminating a household that had conquered not by war alone, but by stubborn affection, guidance, and the audacity to do things differently. A human hero had unwittingly changed an empire. His wife had guided that change. And 12 alien warriors knelt, not in fear, not in submission, but in respect, devotion, and the quiet joy of serving a household that truly understood what it meant to lead, to love, and to live.